This presentation of Loch Ness Discovered is sponsored in part by Jeep, maker of the award-winning Jeep Grand Cherokee, the classic Cherokee, and the legendary Wrangler.
10,000 years ago, the last ice age turned northern Europe into a polar region. In the remote highlands of Scotland, its legacy was a narrow trench of inky water 40 kilometers long that slashed a great diagonal scar across the rugged terrain. Loch Ness is a haunting place. Sheer mountains and murky depths reflect its many moods. It holds more water than any other lake in Britain, but has been famous since the 6th century for a legendary monster, which over 3,000 people claim to have seen. Few scientists have dared to risk their reputations in serious study of the loch, worried they'd be labeled monster hunters. But now science has overcome its shyness. Dr. Glenn George, with other leading scientists from the Freshwater Biological Association, is part of a bold venture to explore this immense volume of water. He believes the featureless surface hides a complex underwater world, which behaves like two different lakes on top of each other. A warmer layer where little lives over a deep, dark, cold underworld with unknown communities and wild underwater weather. The seagoing Calanus, a 65-foot scientific research vessel, will be this team's home and workplace for the next month. Most freshwater lakes are cut off from the sea, but Loch Ness is different. A canal links it to the Atlantic Ocean. It's of great significance to the scientists who can bring this large boat to the loch, and with it, deep-sea equipment and techniques. They want to find out how Loch Ness works by examining what lives in both warm and cold waters and where these organisms get their food. They hope to build a picture of the loch's food chain, but their findings are also needed for a worldwide study about environmental change. This remote location, lack of agriculture and difficult terrain have kept the loch virginal for thousands of years. It's a deep water lake in almost pristine condition, and that's why it's important to a team from Britain's Natural History Museum. They're investigating global pollution and how to identify environments at risk. Information from Loch Ness will be their baseline, a critical piece in a scientific jigsaw.
Actually, we've come to Loch Ness because it's one of the most interesting pieces of fresh water in the United Kingdom. It's the largest body of fresh water in the United Kingdom. Indeed, there is as much water there as all the water in England and Wales put together. And that makes it absolutely unique. One of the things that's unique about it is the great depth here. The sides of the basin plunge away right down to 210 metres. Now, when you consider that a normal lake is only 20 metres deep, 210 metres, just a couple of hundred metres offshore, is absolutely fabulous.
The loch bed is home for microscopic worms called nematodes that the team will be hunting. It's virtually undisturbed, and if there were pollution, this is where it would settle, hundreds of meters below surface, in waters almost deep enough to swallow the Eiffel Tower. Dr. Lambshead and his team are at the cutting edge of their science. The Natural History Museum is famed as a tourist attraction, but is driven by hard-headed science, and sometimes myth can have value.
Nessie, in a way, is quite useful to us because people get attracted to Loch Ness because of Nessie, and hopefully, although Nessie draws them in, they'll actually get attracted to the real monsters that are in the loch. They're very tiny and they're very important, and they're called nematodes.
Nematodes are microscopic worms found everywhere, from the highest mountain to the deepest sea. Many of them are parasites like roundworms, but their importance to this expedition is that they're sensitive to pollution but not destroyed by it. Communities of nematodes adapt. If their environment becomes polluted, some species of the worm disappear and others take their place. Discovering which ones live at the bottom of a pristine lake will give science a starting point of purity to work from when trying to assess pollution.
Just at this point here, we've got the central plateau separating the northern basin from the southern basin.
How deep is that?
Yes, that's about 150 metres.
Still pretty deep then?
Yes, oh yes, quite good. We can then move up into the northern basin, which is considerably deeper. You go down to 200 metres. And if we have time, we can move along, we go further north up to Urquhart Castle.
Urquhart Castle lies on the northern side of the loch, the scene of many sightings and this photograph, taken in 1955 by bank manager Peter McNabb.
A black, undulating, or rather a dark-coloured, undulating creature, a live creature. I lifted the camera, took this shot, which was naturally rather hazy because I had to hold this long focus camera. There's camera shake, excitement, and all the rest. In the picture is the tower of Urquhart Castle. I understand it's a 40-feet high tower, which gives an excellent impression of the overall length of the monster. It's been estimated at between loosely 30 and 40 feet. Before I could get a second shot, it was gone.
Of all the monsters reported around the world, Nessie often seems closest to discovery. But could the sightings simply be misinterpretations of natural phenomena? Dr. Susan Blackmore is a psychologist. Her expertise is visual perception, and she's often called on to examine claims of strange sightings. Most people have heard of the monster, and Dr. Blackmore believes this could affect how they look at the loch.
As a visitor for the first time seeing that loch, I found it a menacing place. The water's cold and dark, the mountains are around the outside. It is a frightening place. And it's possible, I think, that people have dealt with that menace by putting it into a monster. It wouldn't surprise me at all if people take quite a long time to get used to that water, and until they are used to it, they may well see things that they think are monsters, which later on, if they'd seen them, they would realise were just the normal behaviour of the waves in Loch Ness.
As our camera crew travelled back from filming on the loch, they spotted something remarkable. A huge form was breaking the water in front of them. But this sighting was not of a living creature. It was a tremendous wave in otherwise calm waters.
To get actually to work here as a scientist is very exciting. There's been very little done in the loch, but now we want to have a good look at what makes Loch Ness tick.
Dr. Colin Bean is the fish expert on board the Calanus. He's here to trawl for fish at different depths, to find out what they are and how they survive. The distribution of fish and their numbers are influenced by the food available and the threat of being eaten themselves. So information from the trawls may give clues about whether larger predators could exist.
It's not every day we get funds to go and do something we love doing, and an environment that is virtually unexplored by science.
This was the size of the task ahead of him. Dr. Bean expects to find mostly Arctic char, which belong to the salmon family. They were one of the first colonizers of northern lakes after the Ice Age.
Something in it, eh? What do you got, Colin?
Do you know what we've caught, lads?
I'm going to believe this, but oh no!
There's a fish up. A Loch Ness soul.
When did I well? Not like this time. It was brown, lightish brown, black, greenish colour, slimy, solid, and it was very strange. There was a big wake behind it, and it moved at this angle with a wake 2 feet high behind it, and then it went down, and the water surged up, and that was it. And I couldn't. Very difficult on Loch Ness. It's very difficult to measure the size of these things. Luckily, on that same day, exactly in the same spot, I saw one of the swans swimming on that point, and the swan was only 2 feet high. It was more than twice to 3 times higher, taller than the swan. The thickness of the neck was thick as your thigh, 3 times again thicker than the swan's neck. And so altogether it was about 7 feet high. It's a tiny head. You could just see it. It was just basically a long thin neck getting thicker at the bottom, and a small head. But I couldn't see anything else on it.
We know that when people look at patches of water, it is very, very difficult to know how far away something is or what it is you're seeing. For example, if we haven't got much information, then we have to judge size by apparent distance or distance by apparent size. And this is precisely the situation we have at Loch Ness.
Scientist Diane Hewitt is pragmatic about the monster. She's responsible for equipment that will help to map an unexplored underwater world. She tolerates Nessie for the sake of her science.
Well, I suppose the bottom line is if it wasn't for the Nessie legend, there'd be no interest in the lake and we wouldn't have been able to come up here and work. There is no way in Britain today a scientist would be able to put together a programme like this out of the kind of normal funding. It's got to be special funding. And if special funding is built on the back of the Nessie legend, but the outcome is good science, fine, go for it.
The team are interested in plankton, small organisms that drift in the water and provide food for the fish. Working round the clock, they want to chart the movement and location of these plankton to throw light on the loch's ecosystem and its food chain, and ultimately help them understand long-term environmental change.
Our work at Loch Ness really supplies one piece in a very large jigsaw. So the work at Loch Ness is a very small part of what is really a very challenging task, to understand our past and to predict what changes we may expect in coming decades.
An instrument fitted with a range of sensors was used to collect samples. The scientists were curious about a layer of organisms that ran the length of the loch. This so-called scattering layer was suspended in the warmer water about 30 meters down. Precise records were kept of where and when each sample was taken, the skipper recording an exact log of the ship's position, so the distribution of plankton could be plotted. The hours on board were long and arduous, not least for John the cook, who provided constant hot meals to fuel the expedition.
Thanks, Colin. Cheers. That's a lot, That's it. Colin, actually, yeah. Can't believe the equipment not working, so I'm going to get it this time. Yeah, cheers.
Each time the plankton recorder was hauled from the depths, it brought on board another long roll of gauze which had trapped samples from the loch. Almost like a roll of film captures images from moments in time.
Once you start looking at it and once you start really analysing it, always you get more questions. Why? Why not this? Why not that? And then you answer that one and you go a level deeper and something else pops up. There's always another mystery underneath.
Diane's first findings surprised her. The scattering layer turned out to be largely made up of a type of midge lava that spends most of its life in the mud. Mud, which was up to 200 meters below where the larvae were found. It was a finding the scientists cannot yet explain. On one clue, that Loch Ness was not going to behave as expected.
I'm a double. This is I'm an evilest guy in the world. This is. That's how you go in here, right?
You start off anymore, you disturb the sediment.
Did you hear about the?
The secrets of Loch Ness were pulling together leading scientists from three important disciplines: the pursuit of scientific truth was about to shed more light on the loch's gloomy underwater world and its inhabitants. Just 10 meters down, Loch Ness is pitch dark. The scientists are working blind, so they use the sensitive ears of sonar to scan the depths. Its main use is to determine the size and movement of fish in the loch.
My buddy and Gordy and I went down to 10 metres and I totally lost him. He couldn't have been more than 6 feet away from me. Couldn't see him, couldn't see my hand in front of my face, couldn't see my dials. It's like going into a black hole, you know. It was really scary. Not a very pleasant experience at all. Not one I intend to repeat.
If you look up in the top right-hand corner of the screen here, we find this large red mass. This is actually a diver that is swimming underneath the transducer at this very moment in time. The diver is very large and red, which indicates a very strong signal. The fish, by comparison, are very small and blue. It's a very weak signal return.
Sonar sends out ultrasonic waves, which are reflected back by objects underwater.
You don't get a feel for the actual size of the loch just by looking across from shore to shore. You don't get an appreciation of the depth of the loch. It's extremely dark below 15 metres. You get no way of knowing what's going on below the surface. You could actually hide a herd of elephants in there and never come across them with the sonar.
The pencil beam of sonar can sample only narrow sections of the loch. Interpretation is difficult, and false echoes can be generated. A previous sonar survey uncovered strangely regular readings on the loch bed. They've been dubbed the footprints, and it's thought they could be connected to wartime military exercises at the loch. The scientists were not officially researching the footprints, but they were curious. So just as they'd used sonar to listen, they now sent the sea owl to look. The owl makes its dive, searching out its prey. Powerful lights and onboard cameras offering rarely seen views of the loch's inky depths. The location of one of the sonar readings was targeted. Then came the moment of discovery. An anticlimax. The footprint appeared to be a wheelbarrow. But could all the other footprints really be the same? The scientists could only speculate, and the loch bed reclaimed its mystery. The loch bed and its secrets are also the target for the natural history team. They want samples of mud, and with it the nematode worms that live there. The loch's peaty depths have lain almost undisturbed for thousands of years. The deep sediment, a natural history archive trapping information from the past.
If we were to imagine all the animals of the world lined up in a traffic jam, then the first 3/4, 75% of all the animals would be nematodes. The other 25% would be mostly beetles, and then there'd be a few unimportant things like human beings and chickens following up the rear.
In the sea, there can be 10 to 20 million nematodes in a square meter of mud. Such enormous numbers are of value to the scientists for statistical analysis, because the larger the sample, the more accurate the result. The numbers of these worms in the fresh water of Loch Ness will be lower, but the types that exist in this captive community and their critical response to pollutants make them perfect for assessing our impact on the world. The team use a multiple coring device, a giant mechanical hand to plunge into the soupy sediment and retrieve vital samples of the Earth's history.
This is always the moment of truth. Look at that, crystal clear on top.
They are actually really good.
They're full perfect cores. 26, right? It's not too disturbed. Right. I'm glad Steve suggested this method.
Yeah.
You notice there's not much sand in this?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
In the lab, the team must separate the worms from their natural environment.
The information from Loch Ness will be used for the next 20 or 30 years by scientists all around the world who will supply with the data, who will use it in their mathematical models to try and predict the effects of climatic change and pollution. For that reason, this is going to be a very exciting project.
Finding out what species live in Loch Ness will ultimately help them to identify areas at risk from pollution. Back at the loch, a day off for fish expert Colin Bean.
I'm just a sad man. Fish are really the only things I'm interested in, and whether they're alive or whether they're dead, I don't really matter. I don't really care. I think, obviously, anyone that's interested in fish would rather catch them in a line rather than a big net. But from the professional point of view, there's obviously much more information to be gathered by catching them by a net, and it's also a bit easier on the arms.
Dr. Bean's main task on Loch Ness is to trawl its length repeatedly, collecting samples of the fish that live there. This will be the first intensive study of their condition, growth, age structure and diet. It will provide raw data to help build up a picture of the food chain in the loch and establish whether a higher predator could exist. The trawl net being used is 40 meters long with a mouth 8 meters wide. But in a loch this size, it's like a needle in a haystack. The usual image of trawling is a heaving net and a deck awash with the floundering catch. But the reality of a trawl here is somewhat different.
In Loch Ness, where the average catch was somewhere around 2 or 3 fish, the catch of 20 fish in one haul was fairly huge, very exciting and most welcome at the time. These are all Arctic char. We've got a range of sizes here, going from fish that we suspect here will be about a year old to rather large individuals like this one here, which could be anything up to 3, 4, maybe 5 years old.
The food chain in the loch works in much the same way as it does on land. For every large animal, hundreds of smaller ones are needed as food, and each of the smaller ones needs acres of plants to live on. Colin Bean was particularly interested in what his fish were eating. If he knew their diet, he could link into his colleagues' data on the amount of plankton in the loch and work out the potential fish population. Fish stomachs featured large on his menu. But his first findings produced a big surprise. Char are known to feed by sight, yet some fish caught at depths where the human eye would see no light had stomachs full of only one type of prey, and that prey was in scarce supply in the loch. These fish were feeding very selectively in the deepest gloom. Could they be using a sense other than sight? Removing the tiny bones from behind the fish's eye would help shed more light on the food chain. The bones are used to establish the ages of the fish, so their growth rate can be charted and population structures worked out, both of which depend on the food available. A section through the tiny bones is like the cross-section of a tree, a dark ring for every year of life.
We've found a lot of our preconceived conceptions are wrong. Previously we thought that the loch was very unproductive, probably so unproductive that the fish numbers were particularly low. What we have found is that there are more fish than was previously suspected. We found that the loch is richer biologically than we ever imagined.
It was an unexpected finding. Over 20 years ago, a theoretical study calculated around 3 tons of fish in Loch Ness, surmised to be enough to support a higher predator. But Colin's data proved that in reality, there are at least 27 tons of fish, 9 times the previous figure, which has major implications for those who believe large creatures live in the loch. Other evidence supporting this idea has appeared over the years. This photograph was taken near the loch bed by Dr. Robert Rhines in 1972. When enhanced by computer, it appeared to show a flipper-like shape. The image inspired painter and wildlife expert Sir Peter Scott, who painted these imaginary Loch Ness creatures. The beasts of Sir Peter's imagination strongly resemble the prehistoric plesiosaur, which today forms part of Deinomania at places like the Natural History Museum. Here, scientists are also studying remains of the real thing.
A lot of people think that Loch Ness Monster, if one exists, is a plesiosaur, because some of the shapes that have been seen in the water appear to be humps with a long neck. And that, of course, is the nearest equivalent shape to a plesiosaur. Plesiosaurs were a group of marine reptiles. They lived in probably fairly shallow coastal waters. We know they were fish eaters and squid eaters. We don't know much about their family life, or whether they lived in groups or herds. And we don't know much about the way they reproduced, but it's generally supposed that they probably came on shore to lay their eggs, rather like modern turtles do today.
Many eyewitnesses have described seeing a creature with a long neck and a small head. A flurry of recent sightings revived this image.
I saw a head sticking, it was a good foot out the water, and it was very sort of square. And I would say it was quite a dark brown, and then it just went under, just completely disappeared. The ripples just went right out the loch and then brought this waves in at a funny angle right up onto the shore, and that's what made us just jump back. I know what I saw, and it was a definite living creature in that waters. Absolutely couldn't have been anything else.
Edna's first sighting had been 40 minutes earlier. She'd raced off for a camera and got back just in time to see something disappear beneath the flat, calm water.
I was running along the shore to try and keep up with it, and just kept taking photographs as often as I could.
Her pictures show a white line travelling from right to left across the loch, an apparent wash or wake with nothing else to be seen.
I feel in some way a chosen person, almost confusing it with a religious sort of experience, because I feel that no one, again, will see what I saw, exactly where I saw it and when I saw it, obviously. I feel very special.
It makes you special. You're different from everybody else. You've seen it and they haven't. If the monster is there, what else might be there? The Tooth Fairy, Father Christmas. I mean, it's bringing up all these other things that we have to, as sensible adults, put to one side as fantasy. But here's one of them come true.
This is where Edna had her sightings. But on the same night, and at the same time, there was a second sighting of something strange in the loch by a woman whose home overlooks the water from a nearby hillside.
That particular night, it was very calm in the loch. It was like a mill pond, and there was no boat to be seen for miles. Well, whilst I was bathing the children that evening, I looked out of the window and saw a large wake, some half a mile long, and I wondered what it was, because it wasn't like a boat wake. It was like something was protruding out of the water. It lasted for some 10, 15 minutes.
So, 2 firm sightings, but then a third was reported. A father and son who'd cut short a fishing trip were travelling home when they too saw something astonishing.
I saw a big hump in the water and I said to my dad, "Look, there's the monster."
James shouted, "Look, there's the monster." And obviously I didn't believe him at first, but when I looked round and looked out across the loch, which was quite clear at that point, although we were coming in towards trees, I could see this giraffe-type neck coming out of the water, probably about 6 foot high, with a body coming off it very high out of the water as well, probably about 20 odd feet, 20, 30 feet long, and a wake coming off it, going nice and slow, brownish in colour, sort of tiki brown.
The famous surgeon's picture was one of a sequence taken by a London gynecologist in 1934. It appears to show the raised head and neck of a large creature in the loch, but the complete photograph can give quite a different impression about size and again raises issues of perception. In order to examine the evidence in detail, we submitted the photograph to 90s computer enhancement using state-of-the-art techniques, some of them developed for anti-terrorism security. Our experts identified a tiny white object evident in every version of the picture, which implies it was on the negative. It seems to be the source of ripples in the water, almost as if something is being towed along, but computer science can't rule out the chance it was just a blemish on the negative. The famous flipper photograph was also subjected to 90s technology. By enhancing it and then altering the contrast and intensity, our experts were able to reach an intermediate result similar to the original. But whatever they did, they could not achieve the defined rhomboid flipper shape of the final famous enhancement. Hard evidence, like photographs, is supported by eyewitness accounts of immense detail.
It came up, went down, came up, went down, came up, 3 times like that, in that sort of succession, up, up, up. And I sort of leaned across, tapped Susan on the shoulder, because she was actually in the passenger seat, lock side of me, and I said, oh, you know, what's that? And more or less by the time I'd done that, there was a sort of tremendous disturbance in the water, in the direction whatever this thing was going, and there was nothing on the surface, but there was clearly something very large and powerful just under the surface. And then you're looking at it, and suddenly you think, well, you know, crikey, that's the Loch Ness Monster, you know. And then it came heaving out of the water, and it was like watching a whale.
I was most reluctant to look. I'd been reading and I thought, what the hell is he on about, you know? So I sort of gave a cursory look. And then Alistair actually physically pushed me out of the car. And then actually when I was out standing on the lay-by, I actually saw the back static, just motionless, just, you know, right in the middle of the water. And immediately your mind doesn't accept what you see. It goes through your head, what could it be? And my mind didn't automatically think, oh, it's the Loch Ness Monster at all. I was trying to get some rational explanation for what I actually saw there.
When you actually come up here and are confronted with the reality of the place, and you see what a spectacular setting it is for a monster myth, with the ruined castle, high mountains, this mysterious dark water, and then very soon I think the scepticism starts to bite, and you think, well, really, you know, for heaven's sake, this is the ideal place for this monster myth to develop, and all they've been seeing is boat wakes and birds and all the rest. But I mean, the thing that we saw was just quite clearly none of those, you know. Having seen this thing and proved to my own satisfaction that there was truth behind this Nessie legend, it did change my life, I have to say.
People are very certain about things that they should not really be certain about, because that's what happens as people tell and retell accounts. You don't remember how things actually appeared to you at the time. You remember the way your brain has saved an economical version of it. And then you go on and tell that, and it becomes more clear, precise, and with a great deal of certainty as time goes on.
It sounds such an exciting thing. Oh, you go looking for Nessie, but actually, if anybody sits down and does it for longer than 5 minutes, they realise what a absolutely mind-numbingly boring thing it is. I mean, anybody who says it's interesting sitting for 4,000 hours looking for the Loch Ness Monster, they aren't doing it properly. You know, it isn't. It's very, very dull. It's tedious in the extreme.
The level of intensity among many eyewitnesses helps keep the Nessie legend alive, but support for the creature's existence is based largely on subjective experiences. The scientists also want to pursue theories about the loch, but their interest is in the objective data they're recording. Colin Bean monitors sonar screens which track and register the movements of fish as the boat ploughs the loch.
Who's the gin? Are you the gin?
Yes, I'm the gin.
That's one for you.
G&T.
You're right.
The work can be tedious. But on the night of July the 19th, 1993, something extraordinary happened. The screen began to fill with huge convulsions of nature. A massive underwater storm was raging below the boat, deep in the loch.
You're going to have a wee look at this, lad. So I guess this is just going over the Foyers Ridge over here. It's massive.
It was a phenomenon known to science in theory, but rarely witnessed. This underwater weather is a byproduct of the size of the loch. As wind buffets its surface, energy is stored deep in the water. The boundary between warm and cold layers begins to tilt, like water sloshing in a basin. Then 2 or 3 days later, a violent underwater storm erupts.
To actually see something unfold in front of you that you've only seen line drawings of, but very few people have actually seen. Obviously it was a wonderment for both myself and for Glenn.
The next day, while looking at sonar printouts of this weather, the scientists spotted a large and unexplained sonar hit deep in the water.
Unfortunately, we never got it in the dimer point and sonar. We've had it in the back scan and stuff.
Well, that's an even stronger target. I mean, trailing a very distinct wake.
Yeah, it is, yeah. They've been travelling at a fair enough speed, I think.
There's an indication on here that there were two targets together.
Yeah.
You see, there's another V coming behind.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think there's an indication that there may be another target here.
Yeah, well, full enough, there's one here. Well, from the sonar trace that we got, we had an extremely hard hit, followed by a quite pronounced wake. Obviously, I thought it may well have been a fish, but fish don't have wakes. It's something unusual. Neither of us can explain exactly what it is.
Here is the most unusual film of recent years, for it proves the existence of a monster at Ness. Climatic conditions and exposure day and night to bleak and stormy weather affected our film, which accounts for the misty results. But this is unimportant in comparison to the achievement of filming the monster itself for the first time in history.
Over the years, there have been many attempts at Nessie hoaxes, but some evidence has never been disproved. This film was shot in April 1960. Detailed examination by reconnaissance experts suggested the object in it was a living creature. It was filmed by aero engineer Tim Dinsdale.
Like a black anaconda, that's what it looked like. Came out of the water like that, and then it went down, and there was a boil of white foam. And then it broke surface once again with a boil and went on. I didn't see it again.
Our computer experts took another look at the Dinsdale film. They identified a frame with a good view of the object, but the footage was still unclear, so they flicked it into negative.
And one thing I did notice, behind the object, there appeared to be a shadow, which wasn't obvious from the positive image.
Taking it back into positive, the image was enhanced in order to remove dirt and grain. An apparent shadow could be clearly seen beneath the surface of the loch.
One technique I used was by overlaying a number of frames and thereby enhancing the real information. And the shadow now became a distinct shape. Before I saw the film, I thought the Loch Ness Monster was a load of rubbish. Having done the enhancement, I'm not so sure.
So has the plesiosaur theory raised its head again? There could be one major problem.
I don't think it's at all likely that there's a plesiosaur living in Loch Ness. Loch Ness has only existed for the last 10,000 years, since the last ice age. And the last plesiosaurs died out about 70 million years ago. So we've got an awfully long gap.
But if the eyewitnesses are not seeing a plesiosaur, what is the large creature they are so sure they've seen? As a final test of the power of their experiences, Dr. Blackmore invited some of the witnesses to sketch what they remembered seeing. She wanted them to reflect on their perceptions and also to think about the emotions they'd felt at the time.
They say that a woman's best experience in the world is obviously having their first baby, which yes, but the emotions for seeing something like this as well was just so overwhelming. I can't decide which one was the best.
Almost all the witnesses I talked to said it was a dramatic event and in some way changed their lives. I mean, Edna in particular said that it was as important to her emotionally as having her first baby. That may seem odd, but I think when you realise that it's touching on a kind of sort of mythic realm, if you like, all the strange things that one might fantasise about, and you've seen one of them, I think it's perhaps understandable. Hearing all these stories reminded me of the determination of the human mind, always to seek explanations. We don't like to see something or even remember something without giving it a label. And in a place like this, if you see something formless and dark floating in the loch, it's going to be the Loch Ness Monster.
900 kilometres south in London, the museum team were examining their first samples from Loch Ness. John Lambshead's hope was for a new species, a creature tied to a pure environment which will be a critical link in understanding pollution. 7/8 of this museum, the domain of the scientist, is never seen by the public.
What's important is the 60 to 80 million scientific specimens that we store here. These specimens are from all around the world. They're absolutely vital for modern biology because they bring order to biology, just like the periodic table of elements brought order to chemistry.
This classification is critical to science. The originals of millions of species are held here and used by scientists around the world to check the identities of creatures they're working with. Room upon room testify to the centuries-old tradition of collecting and classifying species. And any new creature from Loch Ness would take its place here in history.
We've only looked at a few hundred animals so far from the loch, but already we've found 23 different types of nematode there, and one of them seems to be a completely new species. That is, it's never been discovered before anywhere in the world.
The new species may be small, but will play a key role in scientific understanding. And this will be its final resting place. The science of Loch Ness is only just coming to the surface, with years more work needed before these waters are fully understood. But already the interest shown by science is being repaid with surprises and discoveries from a complex underwater world. The mystery of Nessie also endures. Expert opinion has no firm conclusions, and eyewitnesses remain convinced. Appreciation of such an awesome environment will only grow with understanding. So the search for the truth goes on.
This presentation of Loch Ness Discovered has been sponsored in part by Jeep, maker of the award-winning Jeep Grand Cherokee, the classic Cherokee, and the legendary Wrangler.